You are watching Bloomberg Tech Europe. Coming up, AI-powered drug discovery could be the next frontier of medicine. From cutting costs to speeding up development, the technology promises plenty. But will it deliver? We speak exclusively to Demis Hassabis, the Nobel laureate whose London-based Isomorphic Labs has the ambition to solve all disease. The man responsible for all of Alphabet's core AI work as head of Google DeepMind is setting the bar high for Isomorphic.
The kind of holy grail in a way is to try and tackle cancer, but we've also done it for practical reasons as well because the clinical aspects of that are favourable for new drugs because obviously the disease is so serious.
Well, in this episode, we lift the lid on the AI company working to transform the way we find and develop life-saving drugs. In the race to revolutionise medicine, then, one company stands out for its work to harness the power of artificial intelligence to transform how drugs are discovered. Isomorphic Labs was created to commercialise AlphaFold, the Google DeepMind Nobel Prize-winning AI system that cracked the challenge of predicting protein behaviour. In 2024, the company partnered with drugs giants Novartis and Eli Lilly, marking what was a new chapter for the Alphabet-owned company. Isomorphic Labs founder and CEO Demis Hassabis told me that curing cancer would be the holy grail. The mission statement of Isomorphic Labs is to solve all disease. Where are we, Demis, in that mission?
Well, I think we're making good progress. We're building a kind of general platform to help tackle the understanding, really, of biology and the chemistry that you need to buy into that biology. And I think if it works out, we should be able to tackle many, many diseases.
How should we think about where the time frame sits then in terms of Iso Labs discovering an AI drug and then getting it into clinical trials? Is that a 2025 proposition? Is it 2026 or further out?
Well, actually, we're at preclinical stage at the moment. We've just hired our Chief Medical Officer, Ben Wolf, and he's setting up a world-class team to help us with the clinical phase. But what we're really focusing on, what we've been focused on the last couple of years, is building the core platform and sort of extending the work we did with AlphaFold. But there's many more areas that we need to get into in terms of actually making an impact across drug discovery. And we're making great progress with that. And these first few trials are kind of examples of what the platform might be able to do.
And the internal pipeline for Iso Labs is focused on oncology and immunology, oncology, cancer. Does that suggest that you and the team think cancers can be solved first amongst some of these diseases that we face?
Well, that was always the kind of holy grail in a way, is to try and tackle cancer. But we've also done it for practical reasons as well because, the clinical aspects of that are favourable for new drugs because obviously the disease is so serious. And so there are a number of reasons we picked those two areas, also partly what we think the platform's going to be able to do early on.
There's the speed and efficiency that the platform brings to it. There's the quality as well, of course. When we're thinking about preclinical research and AI drug discovery, usually using the old methods, you were talking, 3 to 6 years? To what extent can you cut that time frame down?
I think in the fullness of time, when our platforms mature in the next couple of years, I'd like to see that cut down into a matter of months instead of years. That's what I think is possible, perhaps even faster than that. So kind of order of magnitude speed up. But we'll see if that's possible. There's a lot of work we've got to do first, but our initial work and our initial signs are very promising.
So getting to the point where we have the FDA or another regulator to green stamp and rubber stamp a drug that can then be shipped out to market, are we talking 6, 7 years, a decade? Is this early 2030s?
Well, right now we're focusing on the drug discovery phase. Of course, after that, even if we improve that by an order of magnitude, so it's months or weeks instead of years, there's still the clinical phase and the regulatory phase. And that's, we're going to sort of partner on those things. That's our current plan. But I think at some point too, once we've cracked the first stage, I think AI can also help with the clinical stage too.
You've partnered with Novartis, you've partnered with Eli Lilly. What does that tell us about what Isomorphic Labs looks like in 5, 10 years' time? Do you focus on partnerships, licensing the technology, or do you want to be kind of a full stack biotech at some point?
Well, look, we have great partnerships with Lilly and Novartis, as you said, and that's helping us figure out what's needed from the platform, and they're world-class organizations, and our collaborations are being really fruitful currently. But with our internal programs, everything's on the table. We'll see those are going well too, and we'll see how far it makes sense for us to carry that through.
And do you look to deepen those relationships with Novartis and Eli Lilly beyond where they already are?
Yes, so we announced earlier this year an expansion of our Novartis partnership from 3 targets to 6 targets, and both collaborations are going very, very well.
You raised back in March, you raised your first external funding, $600 million US, and you're putting that to play in different parts to build out the platform. But also talent seems to be part of that. When you think about talent, when you think about people like Mark Zuckerberg signing checks for $200 million, what does that signal to you?
Well, Lena, that's a slightly different market, which is the pure sort of AGI market, let's say. But it's whether or not that's rational or not, I think our organizations need to think through themselves. But I do think AI is going to be one of the biggest technologies, if not the biggest, that humanity will ever invent. So in some sense, that is rational. But on the other hand, specifically with Isomorphic, we have such a compelling mission of applying AI to improve human health. I mean, what better use of AI is there than that? And that's a really compelling proposition for both our investors and our staff.
AlphaFold 3, AlphaFold, obviously you solved the protein folding problem, but that many thought was unsolvable. AlphaFold 3 it gives you the ability and gives scientists the ability to look at how different molecules and RNA and others interact with proteins. Are you working on an AlphaFold 4 or something that moves things beyond the AlphaFold 3? Where are we in that process?
Well, internally, you can imagine we have things much more advanced than AlphaFold 3, but actually, we need to go beyond just what AlphaFold can do, and not just look at the structure of proteins or the interactions they have, but also go into chemistry, designing the kinds of compounds that are going to bind to the proteins, and also things like ADME properties, toxicity, and making sure that the properties of the compounds you're designing have the desired properties that you need. So actually, we need you can imagine we need sort of several AlphaFold-like level breakthroughs in order to really have an impact.
And you're working on all of those.
And we're working on all of those in parallel.
At pace, in parallel. Yeah. And that's the multimodal approach that you're taking at Isomorphic Labs that some of your competitors and some others aren't. They're squarely focused on one therapeutic or one particular target. Just unpack for us why that makes sense to go the route that you're going then.
Well, we're trying to do it in this very general way. So we're not just trying to find, solve one disease or find one therapy, although that would be great. We're trying to build a platform that can revolutionize the way that we do drug discovery completely, and potentially in the future, discover hundreds of cures. And so to do that, we need to focus on the platform capabilities more than any single therapy or single disease.
You've talked recently about if you solve intelligence, you can solve essentially everything. You clearly think that can apply to the world of medicine. What would be your next priority? What would come after that once you tick that huge box?
Well, I think medicine is always and human health has always been the first thing I wanted to apply AI to, that kind of powerful general AI to, and we're doing that with Isomorphic. But I think there are many other really important areas like energy, helping with material design. So, I think those would be the next areas that help with climate and the energy crisis.
And are large language models the process through which we should look to achieve that, or is there something else that you'd be looking at?
No, I think you need, the large language models will be part of that solution. But just like with Isomorphic, I feel like for a lot of these scientific areas, you also need more specialized models that are using these general algorithm ideas, but they're also adapted to that particular specialized scientific area. And I think for the next 5-10 years, that's what we're going to see. And
the structure of Isomorphic Labs right now, does that make sense? This current structure in kind of 5-10 years, how do you manage that? That's a huge amount to oversee, Demis.
Yes, it is. I don't sleep much, but I'm passionate about both of these areas, and for me, that gives me sort of energy to do all of these things. And there's quite a lot of overlap in terms of the oversights that you see and the breakthroughs that you see in each of the different areas that can help each other. So I think for now, it's there's a lot of synergy between those two missions.
And if the technology and the science progresses as you hope. what will it mean for lifespans, for your lifespan, for my lifespan,
Yeah.
Demis?
Well, look, I think the first step is, I think it's an empirical question. I think the first step is let's find cures to some of these terrible diseases. Let's increase healthy lifespan to begin with, and then we'll see where we go from there.
But we could be in an environment where you and I have elongated lifespans if the technology comes together.
Potentially. I mean, of course, it's an open question what aging is. Is it a combination of all the other diseases, or is it something, specific itself? And, you have different experts. I'm not an expert in that field saying different things. So I think the first stage, which is unequivocally going to be a good thing to progress, is to cure the diseases that that affect us today.
Demis Hassabis, founder and CEO of Isomorphic Labs, speaking to us exclusively. Coming up, how scientists at ISO Labs are working with pharmaceutical giants to solve some of medicine's hardest problems, with AI, of course, at the core. More on that race to change drug discovery forever. We're going to unpack the details. That is next. This is Bloomberg. OK, welcome back, everyone, to Bloomberg Tech Europe. So Isomorphic Labs says it wants to use AI not just to understand biology, but to transform how we discover and develop new medicines. I spoke with Max Jederberg, the company's chief AI officer, and Rebecca Paul, head of medicinal drug design, about the tech behind their drug design engine and how it could reshape the future of healthcare.
What we're doing at Isomorphic Labs, we're building this drug design engine. So you can think of this as a machine which is able to come up with new molecule designs for different disease areas, different indications, and even for different modalities, not just a single modality. And underlying that drug design engine are a whole suite of AI models. These are not just a single model like AlphaFold, but actually we're going to need maybe half a dozen AlphaFold-like breakthroughs that come together into this drug design engine.
And Max, you touched on AlphaFold, and many in the industry had assumed that it was almost an impossible problem to solve, which is the protein folding problem. You and the team managed to do that with AlphaFold 2 and then AlphaFold 3, which gives scientists and medical experts the ability to look at how those molecules interact. You talked about the need for other models. What comes beyond AlphaFold 3? What other breakthroughs do you need, or other models do you need beyond AlphaFold 3 to get the kind of breakthroughs that you and Rebecca are aiming for?
There's still a huge amount of accuracy to be gained on these models, and we're seeing big step changes in accuracy internally with our sort of next versions and iterations of these types of models. And then, as I touched on before, it's not just about understanding the structure of these components. That's really just one part of the problem. You need to understand how strongly these molecules come together. You need to understand how these molecules interact with different parts of the body. A common cause of clinical failure is from toxicity, and a big source of toxicity can be from, for example, how these molecules not just interact with the target protein that you're trying to design for, but interacting with all the other proteins in your body.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine that we need to understand not just how these molecules interact with what we're designing for, but with everything else in the body. That's a big task. And then there's this whole question of actually how do we design these molecules? Because molecular space is massive. Something like 10 to the power of 60. That's a huge number. So you can't brute force search that. You can't just ask these models, hey, how does this molecule look? How does that molecule look? People try to do that. You can maybe feed 100,000, a million, a billion molecules through these systems and start reading the answers. But that barely scratches the surface of this massive molecular space. And so here, there's a huge opportunity for generative models, search processes and agents to be, instead of having to exhaustively search molecular space, molecule by molecule, have generative models that come up with designs that can effectively search the entire space and triage that down.
And both you and Demis have talked about the generalizable technology that you and ISO Labs are building, which is different to some of your competitors. Just explain why that is important, why that's the route that you've taken.
yeah, this notion of generalizability, that's the key for what we're building, because ultimately we don't want to do just a single drug design program and then we're done. No, we want to be building this drug design engine, this machine that we can apply again and again on any target in any disease area, even against, you know, any different modality. So it's really important. What does generalizability mean? That we have these models that they're trained on a certain, you know, set of data, but then they can be applied on something completely novel. They can be applied to a protein, a target that's never been worked on before. They can discover chemical matter that's never been seen in humanity before. And, you know, in practice, we're seeing that bear out day to day. We have benchmarks internally that measure, you know, how generalizable our models are. But, you know, the proof is in the pudding. Yeah. Can you actually use these models on completely novel drug design campaign?
On the partnerships, Becky, with Novartis and Eli Lilly, can you give us some detail in terms of some of the milestones that you and the team have been able to achieve in those partnerships?
We work really closely with Novartis. I think Novartis came out initially and said these are really challenging targets. They're targets we've been working on for many years in some cases. Some of them are sort of a graveyard of pharma effort, and we've managed to make some really good progress on some of them. Some of them represent what we might call dark protein matter, where there's never been a molecule identified to bind to these proteins. And we've managed to identify some of the first chemical matter binding to these proteins. So, they've seen some sort of incredible stepping stones from the Isomorphics platform already.
And Rebecca, why does it make sense for the internal pipeline to focus on immunology and oncology, so cancers? What was the rationale behind that, and what does that mean in terms of what the achievements could be?
It makes sense to focus on those two disease areas. Clinical trials are much more tractable. We can run them in a shorter time frame. They're diseases with a lot of impact as well. I mean, we all know someone affected by cancer. Immunology is also important as well. It affects a huge proportion of the world, people who have inflammatory diseases. So.
What is your... Look, I know this is a difficult question because there's all sorts of variables, but given what you see right now and what you're working on, what would be your best assessment as to when we may be able to cure cancer?
I think cure cancer is a massive statement because actually cancer is a collection of a huge number of diseases, but I think we can see this as a stepwise process towards taking people with different cancers and giving them, hugely better outlook, where actually cancer becomes more of a chronic disease, where you maybe take medicine for life, but you have a normal lifespan. And we already see this in some cancers where medical treatments can, give you a normal lifespan, and I think for me, that would be incredible, right? Cancer is no longer something you need to worry about. It's just something that you need to make sure you get the right treatment, and you maybe have to take treatment, but you have a normal lifespan.
But in 10 years' time, given what you're seeing, given what you and Max are working on, what does our world of medicine look like for people interacting with medicine, interacting with their doctors, having to take therapeutics? How different is it going to look in 10 years?
I think it is difficult to put a time frame on it, but I can see this really exciting future where you don't have to worry. You've got symptoms, you might go to your GP, or maybe you're actually interacting with, some sort of AI tool that can help to diagnose you at that point. It's a massive ambition, but I think it's a really exciting future where we can just really make a big impact on human health and disease. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning, is really thinking about how can I impact patients' lives with the work that we do.
Okay, Max Jederberg, Isomorphics Chief AI Officer, and Rebecca Paul, the company's Head of Medicinal Drug Design, talking to me about the platform and their ambitions. Coming up, we will stay with the race to beat cancer. We're going to hear from a leading expert on AI and healthcare on what the technology means for the fight against that disease. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech Europe. So, the pharmaceutical industry is already being reshaped by artificial intelligence. But how far can the tech actually go, and how fast? I sat down with the director of the Cambridge Centre for AI in Medicine, Michaela van der Schaap, on the promise and the pitfalls of AI-driven drug discovery.
Well, let me just say that the technology that Isomorphic Labs are developing, and also many other, for that matter, startups and companies are developing, is very exciting. However, I do think that we need to be a little bit cautious, because in order to come up with a molecule that is indeed useful and will make it all the way to the regulatory process is another thing.
And data is essential to this, and clinical data, medical data can be siloed, it can be biased, it can be very messy. And the models are only as good as the data that goes into them. Good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out. How much of a hurdle is data for these accomplishments?
Data is very much key, but there is where I'm very optimistic, because there is quite a lot of data. Yes, this data is messy, it contains missing data, and all of that, though, and data may need to be harmonized across these different types of data sets, but this is where AI really can excel.
And you're an academic with deep expertise on AI, on machine learning, but you also worked in industry as well. You've got dozens of patents to your name. How does this technology, if it evolves as you expect, change the balance of power for the pharma industry?
Well, I think that we may see very different new blends of future companies that will build drugs. I think that increasingly the pharmaceutical industry is joined by these very new startups that are building molecules, that are building labs. So I do think that the entire process will change. So I'm excited because there are many diseases, cancer including, where we still don't have the miracle drug. And I hope that this competition is going to energize everybody and provide us with exciting new drugs that will be solving a lot of current diseases that for which we can't have a solution today.
Does a cure to cancer as a result of AI-discovered drugs, does that happen in our lifetimes?
I hope so. And again, it's not only about drugs, it's about using AI also to identify disease much more early, and then finding the right drug for the right person.
Michaela van der Schaar from the Cambridge Centre for AI in Medicine. On the next episode of Bloomberg Tech Europe, we're going to take a deep dive into how artificial intelligence is changing the banking sector, with insights from some of the biggest names in the space, from Wall Street titans to upstart fintechs. We're going to lift the lid on how firms are deploying AI. We'll look at the benefits, the potential risks for a financial industry facing radical change. The opening trade, though, is up next. This is Bloomberg.